Arguably the most thrilling thing about Tunisia's new president, Kais Saied, is his nickname. The low-profile conservative law professor is called RoboCop. He was a comfortable winner in this weekend's presidential runoff, polling more than 70% of the votes, many coming from young Tunisians. Nabila Ramdani is a French-Algerian journalist and broadcaster who specialises in French politics, Islamic affairs and the Arab world. Welcome back to Monocle 24, Nabila. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Tell us a little bit about Kais Saied.
Well, not only Kais Saied won the vote and to become the new president of Tunisia, but he did it with an absolute landslide, as you said. He secured 73% of the votes in the runoff election after defeated Nabil Karoui, who is a media mogul who actually campaigned from prison after being arrested on charges of money laundering and tax fraud. And he's very much, Kais Saied is very much loved by young voters because beyond campaigning as Mr. Clean, as opposed to his opponents, Mr. Saied had massive support among young voters who are naturally the most idealistic. And the polls actually suggested that 90% of young people voted for him. And this is why Mr. Saied has come to personify the spirit of the 2011 Arab Spring and especially the Jasmine Revolution that swept across Tunisia, a movement that was largely peaceful and that represented the aspirations of a bright, ambitious new Tunisia. So after exit polls confirmed his win, Mr. Saied appeared in front of a jubilant crowd in the center of Tunis, and they were very similar to the kind we all witnessed across North Africa and other parts of the Arab world during the Arab Spring. And Mr. Saied, he purposefully said that young people led his campaign, mainly on social media. He stayed away from the traditional way of campaigning, and that's why he claiming that he was responsible, after all, for young people's futures. And this was very moving and very idealistic. But Mr. Saied is also a realist. He knows that having the vast majority of the country behind him is just a beginning, really. But it's a great start, and people want to celebrate it.
You say he campaigned as Mr. Clean. He doesn't have the greatest amount of charisma, but he did have some pretty strict morals that he was adhering to during the campaign.
Yes, indeed. I mean, despite the young loving him, Mr. Saied is in fact pretty stern. He's an independent social conservative whose campaign focused on opposition to westernized and corrupt elites. And he always looks very gloomy. His background is in academia. He was a professor of constitutional law, so he has a very keen eye for detail. And as you said, he's nicknamed the robot because of his seriousness. He's clean living, he's very hardworking, and he says that he detests sleaze. And it was this anti-corruption message that really appealed to the young, and especially since Mr. Saied was up against somebody who had been in prison for corruption. So Mr. Saied's media profile was actually pretty subdued before his presidential campaign. He appeared on TV as a political commentator, but that was about it. He drives an old car, he lives very modestly, and he has promised electoral reforms, including changes to local elections for regional representatives. But all that said, he has pretty reactionary views. He's in favor of restoring the death penalty, which was suspended in Tunisia since 1994. He also opposes equal inheritance for men and women, and is not a supporter of gay rights at all. So he also stood up for a law that punishes unmarried couples who engage in public displays of affection.
So tell us a little bit more about the problems that the next president faces. I mean, you talked about the idea of him being, very clean, very much someone wanting to change things. But Tunisia has an awful lot of problems. It has an awful lot of poverty, it has an awful lot of unemployment, and it has an awful lot of corruption. He's got a very long to-do list.
Yes, I think the main appeal of Saied is that he comes across as a serious politician who wants to run the country according to the rule of law. Karoui, his opponent, concentrated on charity and saying that he wanted to use charity to help the poor. But Tunisians are looking for a lot more. The corruption, unemployment and poor living conditions, which Tunisians revolted against in 2011, haven't gone away. And the death of Ben Ali in Saudi Arabia is highly symbolic, but should also be a reminder of the legacy of state violence, corruption and surveillance to this present day. And figures associated with the old guard have resurfaced, and some even fear a relapse into autocracy.
And will he be able to make sure that none of this touches him, or actually he can deal with the relapse, with the return to autocracy?
Well, while it is true that Tunisia has moved from the past dictatorship to embark on a new path of democracy, it has also turned into an example of the dangers in failing to tackle the socio-economic problems of an increasingly frustrated population in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. And the ruling political class has been sidelined in the presidential election amid high unemployment, failing public services and a stagnant economy. So these issues, which are the nitty-gritty of any state, will have to be Saied's priority. He wants stability and prosperity, but the Tunisian public have now elected a fragmented parliament where effective governance will be difficult to find. And the election showed discontent with the party system and a deep lack of trust in politicians. So Tunisians have effectively rejected the political party system. And this in itself is not a disaster, because this is happening everywhere, including in France and to a certain extent in Britain and America. But it does make strong governance very hard indeed.
It does. I mean, you talk about the rejection of the political party system. It's tough for a country like Tunisia, which only experienced the Arab Spring a little while ago and is feeling its way through the future. How much of an inspiration or a role model can it now act to other countries, given the fact that its exercise in democratic right hasn't been that easy a process?
Well, Saied will definitely need to build a parliamentary consensus if he wants to have any chance of implementing systematic changes, let alone if he wants to uphold the Arab Spring democratic promises.
So what's a Tunisia under Saied going to be like? Is it going to be more liberal? Is it going to be more economically dynamic? What has he promised he will be able to achieve? Because the list that you've given us is very ambitious, but a lot of people say it can't be done.
Well, first of all, I mean, Saied is often accused of supporting political Islam, the Islamist-inspired Ennahda party, which won the most seats in parliament in general elections earlier this month, had called on its supporters to back Saied. And because of these positions, he's suspected of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and the Ennahda movement, which he has stated firmly that he doesn't. Certainly, Saied is a very conservative Muslim, but I don't think there is any indication that he supports any kind of extremism. He campaigned on the values of the 2011 revolution, which was an opposition to corrupt elites in favor of radical decentralization. And you could call him a conservative populist who wants to involve as many people as possible in his vision for Tunisia.
Nabila Ramdani, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Monocle 24. You're listening to The Globalist with Emma Nelson.